Hey everyone, welcome to the Next Gen GTM podcast, where we are talking to tons of different marketing and sales leaders about how the customer journey continues to change and evolve and all the different technologies we can use to become more effective at growing our businesses. And today, I am very excited to share that we have Emilio Garcia. He has told me prior to this that he was into AI before AI was cool because he started out with a very engineering, data driven background, and then fell in love with marketing as a way to understand human psychology. So, what better thing for him to do than to start Boundify, a agency that helps different businesses grow and understand their customers and connect with them. And you've been doing this for years now, right? So we're
Yes.
so excited to have you, Emilio. Please feel free to add anything I might have forgotten.
No, you did fantastic, Maddie. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here as well. And yeah, this is a topic that I truly enjoy. So I think we're going to have a ton of fun.
Absolutely. So I thought it was great when we were getting ready and you talked about, hey, there are two sides to this coin, right? When it comes to really understanding and really winning the go-to-market motion across the customer journey. And one side of that is the data, right? Like what's happening. And the other side of that is the human psychology side. When you think about everything that's going on right now, right? Whether it's the human psychology and people meeting remotely more than they did, and the data and the technology being completely different. Can you start by just talking about, even in the most recent months, what are the biggest challenges that you are seeing businesses face when it comes to making sure they have the best go-to-market motion?
Yeah. I will say again, going back to that topic of how I got started in the industry, I was trying to, back in the time that I started Boundify, it wasn't even called that way before. I was trying to promote another business. That was all that I tried to do. And I was using a very traditional medium. I was using newspapers. And so I discovered what at the time was called AdWords, right? Now Google Ads. And I got really enamored by the idea of, oh, I can see, who is watching or how many impressions I'm getting on this ad and who's clicking on it. And that has evolved tremendously over the years, obviously, to be able to say, well, I know how many people are filling this form and if they're visiting the website, and you can follow all that story up to the point of creating opportunities and closing deals and all the great things that we're doing. So I think technology changed forever marketing because all the previous mediums, is not that they didn't work. That's one thing that I feel someone that comes new to this say, well, we are in digital because digital actually works versus traditional medium doesn't work, and that's not true. They work and continue to work very well. It's just that you have two big problems: is that it's way harder, not impossible, but way harder to measure if they are performing at any level. And second, the other big problem is that it's harder to tell the story of them, right? And I forgot a third one that is very important. Is the other one is the shift in attention. The reason why we are focusing more on digital now is because our eyes now are more and more on phones and computers. So advertising, or at least part of that part of marketing, has always been about where's people spending time, and if they're spending time in their screens, that's where you need to be, right? So I think that have changed the conversation forever, but at the same time created some very bad incentives, because yes, you can measure more now, you can have better granularity and all the little things that you do, but even the best, attribution model and system to measure data continues to be an approximation of reality. It's a model that is sampling little things, because the most important one is still out of our reach, which is what is it that your buyer is thinking. You get breadcrumbs of that, right, through their actions. But because we cannot yet know what a person is thinking when they're taking action, there's not an easy way to know if you have someone visiting your website and is consuming a ton of content. Is that person thinking about buying from you, or is just trying to learn, or is it a student? So you can take any metric and game it, if you want to call it that way, or make it tell a story that has nothing to do with what is in the mindset of that person. And probably the biggest one, the one that have really shift my thinking, is that the most impactful thing that marketing can do, which is at least for B2B, which is the type of clients that we cater for, which is putting your brand in the consideration set, right? On when I'm thinking about this problem or this category, and I think about 3 brands or 4 brands, that your brand is one of them, that's very hard to measure. How do you know? But it requires a ton of marketing activities that have little impact in the analytics. So that's why, Maddie, I say, that I started with data, but now more days become more of a psychology-driven person, because what makes a brand to stand out has a lot to do with our biases, with our tendencies, right? Bias association, availability, right? Is I have seen this frequently or not. Social proof, all those things that have more to do with how we behave based on what other humans behave and do, rather than trying to get out of the metrics on your website, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So, what would you say the top 3 challenges most companies bring to you, like right off the bat? Like, what are the ones you see most often that you're like, man, here they are. We knew it was coming, right?
Yeah. Well, again, drawing into the type of people that we try to help and companies we try to help, usually is something related to marketing. It's a person that has the marketing role or the function, but it's just one person or two, and the rest they are getting help with other people. So they struggle with resources to accomplish the many things that they want to do. That's one big one, right? I have this big mandate. It's usually driven by growth requirements, and I don't have enough time and to implement everything that I want to do. That's a big one. The second one that is a big struggle is that while that growth is required, is usually driven, or at least in part related to their sales motion, and sales and marketing are not working exactly in the same terms, right? They are not aligned as good as they should for that to happen. I think that's a big one, second big one. And the third one is this whole attribution problem, right? Is I'm doing things. How do I show to management and the executives that what I'm doing is having impact? I struggle with it, either because is at least from the metrics that I have is not working, or if it's working, I cannot explain why and how to do more of that. So I think those are the 3 big ones.
So you mentioned, so to recap those, number 1, automation, setting up automations and flows to help scale your time. Yeah. Right. Like we could all be millionaires if we could talk to 1 million people a day, and right. And not, just face to face, but there's a moment when you're driving the funnel, and then there sounds like there's a moment when you're face to face. So one is just prioritizing that time. You said the second one, connecting functions. So I heard marketing and sales can be, a tough handoff point. And then the third one, right, was attribution. So, obviously you guys work directly into the CRMs. Like that's a huge place. I know you guys, HubSpot, right, seems to be the one that you guys, and that of course started out as a marketing platform, right, and has now evolved into a marketing and sales platform. What do some of those, walk me through the rudimentary playbooks and the things that you're like, hey, if I'm coming in, and I'm just getting this off the ground and started for people, I got to save them time. I've got to connect marketing and sales. I've got to get attribution. Walk me through a little bit of what that looks like when it comes to setting up a platform like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. How do you, if you have that slate, blank slate of a portal, where do you start, right? What do you do first? That answer have shifted as well over time. My answer right now is that probably you want to start with sales, right? When you're brand new or a company that's starting from zero, the first motion that they have to settle properly is sales. And what I mean settle out properly is that HubSpot is, or a CRM of any sort, is just one of three main components that you need for us for the sales function to really properly work well, right? It's technology, but you need processes and people, right? So we're assuming that you have the people. That's one thing that usually smaller companies have to solve, right? They cannot be the founder, or as much as possible, as soon as possible, that you can delegate that function to someone that has full responsibility for sales. You want to do that, but assuming that you already have that, then before even thinking about the technology, the CRM, you need to think about the process, right? Is what is it that we're going to do for selling? And so the first motion that I think you have to figure out on those three components is the sales function, right? What is the process that by people will follow and where they will do it? When you do that, typically, immediately you have a feedback loop in the form of the reports that you build, right? A way of measuring initially activity, because it's the one thing that you can measure very quickly. It's a very short feedback loop. Are we making the calls? Are we adding the leads? Are we having conversations? And eventually you start having just those big lagging indicators as how many opportunities that we have open, how big is the pipeline, how many opportunities are we closing, all that fun stuff. I believe that once you have that, then you, depending on the company, it will shift into any of the two other client-facing departments, right? Either your biggest opportunity is in expanding the customers that you land, and then you shift your focus completely to customer success or customer support on upselling and cross-selling and delivering great value on the account so you can sell more, and you will have to build out that process. Or is really not your business, or at least the products that you're offering, they don't have a ton of opportunity there, and you rather focus more on the marketing motion, right? Which I like this analogy. It's not from me. I heard it from a guy in LinkedIn, Dale. I forgot his last name. That he uses the idea that marketing is a multiplier of sales, non-linear multiplier of sales, right? So if you hire a salesperson, and let's say that for each dollar that the sales function costs you, you get four. That's fantastic, right? You're getting a leverage of four. And if you want to increase revenue, you hire more sales reps, or as you were saying, right, you leverage technology and automation to make the person maybe go into 5x or 6x with the same effort. But the other thing that you can do, because most salespeople are either prospecting or closing, is to reduce the time that they prospect so they can focus more time on closing. And the only way to do that is that you bring in qualified leads, right? Instead of you sourcing them out. And so that's pretty much what marketing does. You do this extra investment to amplify the message of the company so you can reduce the amount of time that overall those salespeople dedicate to prospecting. And that's the function that you want to leverage later, right? So in my go-to-market idea, I will start obviously with sales, and then depending on your focus, shift into customer success, or typically is marketing, to multiply the effect that sales have.
I love that point. I love that point of like, you're starting with a process that's all humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're building out the scale of that core process step by step, kind of from the center. And so you mentioned, so that key point, right, is you figured out that early sales motion, and you've started to say, okay, we can scale this by headcount. We can scale this by making that individual more productive. But then it's also, you can scale this by moving the scope from prospecting to closing. So now we're kind of sliding up. But you mentioned at the beginning, you see challenges there, right? Like that handoff, right? I mean, I know folks have talked about speed to lead. They've talked about making sure the leads are qualified. Take me there. Like, what is the challenge in that space, and why is it so hard, right, to have that done right?
Yeah, I'll say that the key of why having sales and marketing alignment is so hard is because the marketer typically thinks in terms of either intent or fit, but the two departments fail on agreeing on both, right? On having clear expectations about both ideas, right? So sometimes you have channels that are great at intent, right? You have paid search or search in general where the intent is very clear. What keyword do you use? Um, and even the forms themselves, right, are like, well, I'm asking all these questions. I want to know about the size of the project. So they are very good at filtering out intent. Um, and some other channels are great at fit, right? If you go on prospects on LinkedIn or any other, I'm using LinkedIn for social for B2B, but if this is for a B2C motion, you can find a social media place where your market is hangs around. So you will be very good at fit, but then there you will fail at intent because not necessarily everyone that is there right now is looking for your option. So most of the mismatch happens at the conflict of those two ideas. Either marketing is delivering a ton of leads that are showing intent, but are not properly qualified in terms of fit for the organization, right? Because again, that salesperson, when they do prospecting, they make that mistake less in a less amount of time, right? They rarely, or they have a very low incentive to picking up the wrong accounts because you're gonna waste time. Um, and so you either deliver a ton of leads that somehow have intent, but they're not a good fit. And the other common problem is I have identified fit, but I'm assuming intent, right?
Mm.
It's a 500 company, is the director or is the decision maker, and they just happen to download an ebook. And so, therefore, sales, you should reach out, right? So, not being specific about that, building a ladder of, of all, you can make it a quadrant of it, right? This is high intent, high fit. This is the priority. If you happen to have time, if you don't have any more deals to close or prospecting to do on your own, I have either hit great fit, low intent, or high intent, not great fit. That's your choice. And definitely marketing should, not put in front of sales leads that are not in good, they don't have intent and they don't have fit for sure. There are ways that you do that, but for me, that's the main source of the issues. That failure of matching intent and fitness.
It's such a cool we hear about that problem so much, right? Like
Yeah.
we hear about it, it always depends on which side you're on, right? If you're on the sales side, God, those marketers, what are they doing, right? And if you're on the
Right.
marketing side, like, oh, come on, the salespeople, what are they doing? So it's really cool to like talk about that tension and actually link that tension back to the mediums that we're using, right? To like try
Yeah.
to bring in people's interest, right? I mean, like literally, to your point, it goes all the way back to I searched something. So I signaled my own intent, or I filled out a form, or I downloaded an ebook, right? And we're extrapolating in. It's one of the reasons why what we see and where we focus is, you know, there is a really unique moment in time now where you kind of had like the human conversations that had to happen once a person was ready to say, okay, it's in my quadrant, right? Like I'm gonna go get them. And then you had the digital automation, right? Which is the pre. And it seems like a lot of people are talking about the middle, right? That something's now happening in the middle across the bridge, right? Especially with the advent of AI technology that can have conversations or that can
Yes.
infer more things about that intent or about that fit. Where have you started seeing that pop up? Have you, what is your kind of take on what's going on there?
Yeah, I think definitely it is a game changer. I think it will enable way more natural ways to have that nudge effect, right, on people when you are having interactions. Um, Two things that I feel will definitely make it right for users, right? Those implementations are that we think on where is appropriate based on volume. That will be the first one. And second, again, thinking that just because I can automate it doesn't mean that I will make it um, not annoying, right, or not friendly to humans. Just like we have to still thinking about that. Just because AI is doing it, it still has to be as a human will approach it as much as possible, right? So the first one is that don't over automate. I'm drawing that one not from AI, but from all the things that have happened on automation in general for marketing, right? Is um, as you know, right, in tools like HubSpot, you can automate everything, but that doesn't mean that you should automate everything. What usually you need to do is that you look at your process and find the places where you have a ton of repetitiveness, right, of a ton of repetition. And even when you identify those places, the first thing that you have to ask is not how I automate that. Is the first question that you need to ask is, do I need to do this? Right? Is the first question is, can I eliminate it? Because if I can eliminate it, then I don't need to automate it, and therefore take maintenance of it. So for me, I follow this. Again, I don't remember where I draw on it, but it's you ask the question, can we eliminate it? And if we cannot eliminate it, can we make it simpler? And if we cannot make it simpler, then we start asking, well, how do we automate it? I think that the same will apply to AI. I think we need to start thinking whenever we have a process where AI can have a function, is asking the question, do I need to do it at all? And then asking these other questions before actually putting automation. Because once you start, it feels so easy to just keep doing it because it doesn't cost you as much, but that makes it very inefficient. The process, how to maintain it, and for the user, because you're putting someone there in a step that they shouldn't have. That's one. The second one is that human component, right? Is I don't have anything against the persistence of marketing and sales, right? I think it is appropriate to say, because we don't know your mental state, that we ask. We have to ask, right? If you are just thinking about relationships, right? If you are in a bar or in a public place where other people hangs around, it's super valid to say you are interested in having a conversation with me, right? I'm assuming that one of the reasons you are here is because maybe you're interested in meeting someone else, right? There's nothing wrong with that. What's really weird is that once that answer is once that question is answered, that you continue to ask it, right? That's pretty much the threshold. So I think in marketing, right, in commercial relationship applies very the same way. I have these cues, and these cues usually mean this, but I'm not in your brain, so I have no idea. I will ask or I will suggest. And once I do that, your answer or inaction tells something. I think we need to continuously apply that criteria to make it fun or easy for the user and not annoy someone, and therefore dilute the brand, affect the brand, which using AI is super dangerous because you don't have that feedback, right, to know that you are being annoying. And so those are the things that I believe about that.
It's so funny, right? Because again, we sit on the other side, right? Where we're
Yeah.
training these AI agents to go have human experiences. And it's almost like you come to these situations where you see, like, because it almost matters, like, how has this AI been trained? Not just, a lot of people hear like AI training and they think like machine learning, MIT, but also like really like, what are the controls? What are the
Yes.
criteria? What are the rules of your playbook that have been inscribed into this AI workflow so that, again, this AI isn't winging it? It is actually delivering that process that you talked about based on the same criteria that you would give a person.
Yes.
But then to your point, it's okay, so what's the criteria we give to a person? Well, if it's a task like, hey, you need to make sure that anytime someone asks you to reschedule a meeting, you need to take care of that, right? Like, okay, that's a low level task for a human. It's probably decent, something we could, versus like, you need to go create a mind and heart opening, insightful way to talk to this user about their problem, right? I think, it's interesting, right? Because we're just seeing a ton of people on that spectrum, right?
Yes.
Of, have we picked a process that has rules and criteria, and we now have galvanized that process with AI.
Yeah.
And the process itself is one that we believe an entry level person can handle, right? We're not going to send the new hire to the CEO's office.
Yes.
It's just interesting, right? Because I feel like those level of controls and discernment, I don't know about you, but I've started to see people almost expect, to your point, to skip that process and go straight to that automation and have all these expectations, and then they end up kind of in a pickle.
Yes. No, no, definitely. Again, thinking on you can think. I feel that you can think of AI as expanded intelligence, right? Just in a way that we saw in the Industrial Revolution, machines as expanded power, right? Is that now you are capable of using energy in a more amplified way. So I think in AI is you get access to this extra intelligence that we didn't have access to, and that's super super helpful. But just like you will do with someone that you are bringing on board for the team for the first time, that they are smart and capable doesn't mean that you just go throw them out around there and say, now let's go to the client or let's go and do this activity. There's a training process. Um, Definitely, I can see that there's going to be areas where AI will be better than humans in ways of that how that training process goes. But it's still, the reason training exists is not because the person is not intelligent, it's because you need feedback, right? You're saying about, if I want to build this process that you will handle, I need to know that it's working as I intended. And so there's little steps that you build. You get feedback from not just the trainee, but the client of the trainee, right? Is he or she doing it right? Is this what you expect? And once you do that, then you, as you said, you galvanize that process and said, like, this is what we're going to do. And I agree with you that there's a ton of people out there that are using this as a way of saying, well, I'm not going to just throw this to the AI and ask it to do it, and there's no feedback at all. So that's something that, again, if you were doing this with humans, you wouldn't do.
Right, exactly. And humans are by definition still more intelligent, right? So
Yes,
you're
yes.
saying I would train my humans. I would look for tools that allowed me to control my humans, and
Yes.
then, but not here. And it's funny, someone said on a different episode, like, AI is not meant to make you lazy. Like,
Yeah.
this is not a tool to create laziness. And I think, that's where some risk comes from, right? And you talked about, like, you're creating experiences, you're creating human experiences. And what I also loved about what you said was that metaphor of, maybe you're at a bar, maybe you're at a restaurant. And if you say, like, if you walk into a restaurant, then someone can say, oh, do you want to sit down and eat? Right? Like,
Yes.
like, no one's going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I know I just walked in here, but let's stop with the interrogation, right?
Right.
And but then you play that story out, and it's like, you don't mind if you say, well, I want to know what your menu is. Great, here's my menu.
Right.
Oh, I see you have a fish dish. Do you blah, blah, blah? Yes, I do. Oh, well, I was hoping to sit somewhere, with someone like this. Oh, we have 3 people right over here. Do you want me to
Right.
lead you to this table? And, oh, by the way, here, like, I feel like there's all these behaviors that not only it's almost like, and we talk about this all the time, right? Our thesis is like, how do you create AI to enhance the human experience? And it feels like it's some of that stuff, right? Because we've talked about, if you walked in and they said, hey, welcome to our restaurant, do you want to buy the whole place? And here's your dinner, I've already made it for you, please eat it now. You'd be like, I'm leaving, right? So
Yes.
so talk to me a little bit about where you can see it enhancing that customer experience and not, creating this awful runaway type
Experience.
situation.
Yes. Well, again, where I can see AI is creating great experiences is when it's added thoughtfully to things that we are already doing that are very time consuming. I think we were talking before, recording this episode, that I can say, for example, the whole process of creating video content, there's a series of steps where they're clearly repetitive tasks, right? How do you schedule the event itself? But more importantly, once you are done with the event, how do you organize the content into sections that are more digestible for someone that is listening or watching to this? And eventually, if you're going to promote it, what small clips or pieces you're going to take from that? And that's a very time-consuming process. One that requires understanding, one that is time-consuming, but especially that is very repetitive. It happens after every episode. If you don't do it, then you lose most of the benefit of doing things like this, which is having those little snippets of wisdom that you can, get from someone when you are having conversations. So I've seen when those features are used in that way, they were fantastic. The other one that I think is awesome, there was a constraint on conversations on recording, is recording your video has been available for a long time on Zoom calls. Even transcripts have been available on a long time. But the biggest challenge of transcripts has always been that if you wanted to extract something, you have to go in and search the part that you remember, right? So it was minute 10, minute 15. So now being able to search across that, but more importantly, to say something like, I found this feature super, super interesting. One of the first AI implementations that I saw is saying, well, this meeting was about these terms or these topics, and these are the key action items that were discussed, and this is the summary. That's perfect. But is making the assumption that that was the kind of call that you had. But if you had the transcript, then you can reverse the question and say, well, actually, the call was about this, was a sales conversation, or was a customer support conversation, or it was a friend's conversation, a philosophical one, whatever it is. You can say, well, based on that, give me a summary of it. And so it is like asking a human, can you read this and give me a summary of it? So I find those features very, very powerful. The ones that I found like very bad uses is like what you were saying at the beginning, right? For creating, crappy content, for creating sales motions that are pretty much an amplified version of spam, right? I think all the things that annoy us or that add no value, that I feel are gonna be like in those science fiction movies and books where you have bots talking to bots doing nothing, right? Because everybody's putting their agents in between. So I think those are the things that are inevitable. They're gonna happen, but they're the worst use of AI.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, it's a real place, right? And we always talk like, look, technology can be used for good. There are a lot of great businesses that were built off the back of sending insightful emails to potential buyers, and they created great partnerships. Like, we can't say that's not true, but we can also say that what people think of when they think of cold email is immediately spam, right? And you kind of said like you believe in asking the question and creating this ability to say, did your intent mean something? And then I loved how you talked about, what is the characteristic of a good AI role, right? It sounds like it's something repetitive, it's something time consuming, and it's something that takes more than a bare minimum level of insight.
Yes.
Right? Like if it takes no insight, you can just use a template. Mm-hmm. But there is a real fine line in when you eliminate the human entirely, right? And when you make the choice of, is this AI a receptionist designed to get people in front of each other? Is it, a spray and pray bot? Is it helping you? Is it a content editor? What is the role? And it's cool because I think we see businesses defining that. And I think, one of the things you talked about, just to kind of bring it full circle and wrap it up a little bit, was, hey, we're starting at this nugget, even in the very early days, right? We're starting around this process that someone has set up that says, this is what brings your value together at life. And then you're working to continuously, efficiently scale that process in a way that continues to drive the same result. And I know, you've got so many sides of that debate, right? You've got Sam Altman, who's like, hey, the next $1 billion unicorn could be founded by one person, one guy in a room. right? And then you've got other people being like, yeah, I'm not going to put my money on that bet, right? Because, and I think it feels like, right, you're probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like,
Yes.
there's probably some middle ground where we, you mentioned at the beginning of this, like newspapers still work, guys. Like we can use a lot of different things to create this customer experience as long as we're dedicated to the customer experience.
Yeah.
Um, so if you had to leave everybody with 3 takeaways, like 3 things that like, hey, I'm trying to get my go-to-market motion dialed in. I know what works, but I'm trying to scale my process. What would those 3 things you would tell them be?
Great question. How do you what are the key as you were saying before we record this conversation, what are the things that won't change? I think that's a very powerful. Actually, I'd heard it from, I don't know if you heard from the same person. I heard it from an interview with Jeff Bezos. They were asking him about, how he saw technology in the next 10 years or something, one of the kind of questions. And he answered something in the lines of, I don't worry as much about what will change, rather what will not change, right? In 10 years, people will still want to buy as cheap as possible, the products, and they will want their things as fast as possible. That will not change in the next 10 years. Nobody will say, oh, you know what? I want my things, in longer times and as expensive as possible. And so he says, I focus on those things because that way I can set up strategies that, withstand time. So I think for marketing, I think that's the key, right? When you want to start, it hasn't changed. Is that it doesn't matter if you have HubSpot and automations and AI. Your marketing strategy starts with the customer. You want to know what is it that you are trying to sell, but more importantly, what is the problem that you are solving for your client? That's super super important. So that's one key one. Most of us marketers struggle with the fact that we rarely talk to our clients directly, and so we have these assumptions, and the only way to know what they're truly trying to accomplish is to have, you can automate it. I'm not saying that you can't automate it, but you want to have conversations understanding why is it that you're buying from us, or what is it that your product or our product is solving for you, right? You might discover that the problem can be solved with a different version of your product and vice versa. So that's one key important one. The second one is, for me, is now that you focus on your company, is what are the goals of your company? That's where most of that sales and marketing alignment problem comes, right? Is yes, now you understand your client, what they're trying to solve, but is your marketing motion really aligned with the goals of the organization? Because even if sometimes you have a clear understanding of the ideal clients that your company want and the products that you want to promote, sometimes your sales team or the business itself will have more narrow focus. We're going to get into this new market. We want to launch. We really want to move this product or this product line, and then your marketing is not aligned into that. It's too broad, right? Or it's too diluted. And so is the second one will be your goals for the business. And the third one, finally, really focus on your execution, is if you're thinking automation or AI, really question that where do you have tasks that are repetitive and time consuming, and asking first, can we just not do it at all? And if that's not possible, then you start thinking about how do I automate it and make it faster.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Emilio, for coming on the podcast. This was great. I loved kind of the insights you brought to the table,
Thank you, Mel.
and look forward to sharing this out with everybody when it's time to listen to it.
Oh, I had a great time, and yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.